Everything seemed quiet, until Karoline dropped a bombshell that no one saw coming. In a moment that stunned both supporters and critics, she revealed something about former President Barack Obama that left audiences gasping. The setting was unassuming. A routine interview, some thought. But within seconds of speaking, Karoline's calm demeanor gave way to something far more intense. Her eyes locked on the camera, and with the kind of precision only reserved for those holding back nothing, she began to dismantle the carefully curated image the world has known for over a decade. "You've all been lied to," she said, her voice unwavering. People leaned in. Scrolling stopped, hearts pounded. Without hesitation, she unleashed a series of revelations that tore through the room like wildfire. According to Karoline, the Obama legacy isn't just polished speeches and presidential charm. It's riddled with manipulation, secrecy, and moves made behind closed doors that, if true, would change everything we thought we knew. And this wasn't vague speculation. She came with names, timelines, details. From whispered backroom deals during his time in the Senate to the calculated narrative spun during his presidency, nothing was off limits. Karoline exposed a side of Obama the media never dared to question, let alone air. The room fell silent. The interviewer didn't know where to look. Was this for real? But she wasn't done. Karoline's words carried the weight of someone who's been waiting years to speak. She spoke of alliances forged not for the people, but for personal gain. She hinted at manipulation of public opinion so subtle, it blurred the lines between truth and fiction. It wasn't just about politics, it was about power, influence, control, and the audience felt it, raw, unfiltered, and dangerously close to truth. Social media exploded. Clips of her interview flooded timelines. Karoline Exposes trended within hours. Some praised her for courage. Others accused her of character assassination. But no one could ignore her, because in a single interview, Karoline shattered the narrative. She forced people to ask questions they'd long buried. Who is Barack Obama when the cameras are off? What did we really see over those 8 years in the White House? This wasn't just another hot take. It felt like a reckoning. Some tried to discredit her. They said she was chasing fame, pushing conspiracy. But the conviction in her voice? The detail in her story, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like truth, ugly, complicated, and impossible to unhear. And perhaps that's what shook people the most. Because if even a fraction of what she said is real, then history books might need rewriting. The mythos around one of the most iconic figures of our time could begin to unravel. And Karoline, unafraid and unapologetic, might just be the one who started it. Whether you believe her or not, one thing is certain. After this, nothing about Obama looks the same. And people can't stop watching. The backlash came fast. Networks scrambled to either bury or dissect the footage. Commentators picked apart every word, trying to poke holes in Karoline's account. But the damage had been done. The video was everywhere. Screenshots, reaction, videos, debate panels. It dominated every corner of the internet. What made it even more electric wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Calm, collected, no stuttering, no second guessing. It wasn't the voice of a whistleblower cracking under pressure. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and what it would cost. And still, she didn't flinch. As the days rolled on, the story refused to die. Journalists began digging into the claims, some quietly confirming what few dared to say publicly. Emails, off-the-record confirmations. A few insiders came forward anonymously, validating pieces of her story with chilling consistency. Was this the unraveling of an untouchable legacy? Even those who once idolized Obama began asking uncomfortable questions, not because they wanted to, but because now they had to. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and Karoline had watered them with cold, hard conviction. Then came the silence from Obama's camp. No statements, no denials, not even a carefully worded deflection. Just silence. And in the world of politics, silence is often louder than denial. Theories spread like wildfire. Was this part of a larger agenda? A buried scandal timed to erupt at a moment of vulnerability? Or was Karoline simply done playing along, done watching from the sidelines while a crafted image was paraded like gospel? Whatever the truth, she didn't stop with one appearance. She went on podcasts, gave follow-up interviews, dropped new details like grenades. Each one sparked more controversy, more attention, and behind it all was the unmistakable sense that she knew something, many things people weren't ready to hear. Yet she spoke anyway. Her critics couldn't keep up. Every attempt to discredit her made her stronger. Every smear campaign only amplified her reach. She wasn't running. She was standing taller, and that terrified people, because Karoline hadn't just challenged a man. She had challenged a legacy, an era, an idea, and legacies don't go down without a fight. Still, the public kept asking, why now? Why speak up years after Obama left office? What pushed her to break ranks? And what else does she know? If her first revelations were just the tip of the iceberg, then we may only be at the beginning of something far bigger, something darker, something that forces us to re-examine not just one man, but the entire system that protected him. People aren't just watching, they're waiting. Waiting for Karoline's next move. Waiting for Obama to break the silence. Waiting for the moment when the truth, whatever it is, can no longer be ignored. Because once a story like this starts, it doesn't go away. It detonates, and this explosion has only just begun. Karoline had lit the match, but now the fire had a life of its own. Whispers turned into full-blown conversations behind closed doors. Think tanks, campaign strategists, and PR firms started scrambling, not just to manage optics, but to brace for the fallout. Because what Karoline had exposed wasn't just about one administration. It was a peek behind the curtain, into a world built on silence, favors, and invisible strings. And she knew it. In one of her next interviews, she didn't hold back. "They're panicking," she said plainly, staring straight into the lens. "They didn't think anyone would talk, but now they're calling everyone, cleaning files, deleting emails. But it's too late. I've got it all." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. That line alone sent shockwaves through political circles. Phones buzzed, flights were booked, lawyers were retained. Because if she had receipts, and all signs pointed to yes, then the old playbook wouldn't work. She couldn't be dismissed as some fringe voice when every prediction she made had already started surfacing. She claimed there were documents, communications, leaked memos that painted a picture of a presidency not powered by hope, but by control. Not by unity, but by division dressed in charm. People demanded proof. They wanted the smoking gun. And Karoline? She didn't rush. She let the suspense build. Every move she made seemed calculated, dripping one piece of evidence at a time, each more damning than the last. First, it was a confidential memo from an internal advisory team during Obama's first term, allegedly outlining psychological strategies for manipulating media coverage and public opinion during foreign policy crises. Then came a leaked transcript, unconfirmed but chilling, hinting at secret meetings with lobbyists the public never knew existed, pushing agendas that conflicted with Obama's public stance. Each release came with a warning. This is only the beginning, and that's when people started flipping. Staffers, consultants. A few brave insiders came forward under anonymity, confirming what Karoline had claimed. They didn't give everything, but what they did give was enough to widen the cracks. And still, Obama said nothing. His silence had become a vacuum. And in that vacuum, Karoline's voice echoed louder, stronger. News outlets began to split. Some launched full-blown investigations. Others went into defense mode, questioning Karoline's motives. But even the most loyal networks couldn't deny the effect. Millions were tuning in, not out. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Obama anymore. It was about every untouchable institution that had protected him. It was about accountability, long overdue. And it was about one woman, standing, completely alone, refusing to be quiet. She wasn't asking for fame. She wasn't pushing a book or seeking office. That's what made it even more unsettling. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And still, she pressed on. One question now hangs in the air like smoke from a fire no one can put out. What happens when the world's most beloved political figure is no longer protected by the myth? Because Karoline didn't just question the myth, she cracked it, and something's coming through that crack. Something raw, something dangerous, and maybe, just maybe, something true. The world was no longer watching quietly. They were divided, fiercely, unforgivingly. Lines were drawn not just on political grounds, but moral ones. Was Karoline the brave voice of truth in a sea of deception, or a saboteur unraveling progress for her own reasons? But here's the thing, she didn't care. While debates raged in comment sections and cable news studios, Karoline kept pushing forward, methodically, boldly, with the resolve of someone who already knew how deep the rabbit hole went and was unafraid of what she'd find. And then came the footage. It was grainy, old, time-stamped from a private fundraiser nearly 15 years ago. The video showed a younger Obama, relaxed, off-script, unguarded, speaking not to a crowd of voters, but to high-profile donors in what appeared to be a closed-door strategy session. What he said wasn't illegal, but it was damning. In that room, behind layers of privacy and privilege, the polished man America knew disappeared. He spoke with a cold calculus that made even seasoned operatives uneasy. Discussing media control, narrative manufacturing, even population segmentation, strategies to weaponize identity politics not to heal division, but to exploit it. The footage ended abruptly, but it was enough to prove Karoline hadn't been bluffing, and that's when the tone shifted. People who once dismissed her as dramatic or delusional suddenly fell silent. Writers who mocked her now started hedging their words. Commentators who once rolled their eyes began choosing their language more carefully. And for the first time, Barack Obama's camp responded. A single spokesperson appeared on a late-night network interview, visibly rattled, brushing off the clip as selectively edited, calling Karoline a politically motivated disruptor. But their statement backfired. Badly, because Karoline didn't just respond. She retaliated. The next morning she dropped the full uncut version of the video, nearly an hour long. Not a splice, not a highlight reel. The full scene, raw and uninterrupted. And what it showed was far worse than people expected. Jokes about media manipulation, thinly veiled references to suppressing independent journalism, conversations about shifting demographic messaging not to unify Americans, but to secure control through fear and subtle division. The public was shaken. Not just conservatives, not just critics, independents, centrists, even quiet moderates who had once voted for hope and change were now staring at a screen with the uncomfortable realization that maybe, just maybe, they were sold a product instead of a person. And Karoline? She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply released a statement. This isn't about destroying a man. It's about unmasking a machine. You don't have to believe me. Just believe what you saw with your own eyes. The words echoed. Because, for many, this wasn't just about Obama anymore. It was about trust. About waking up to the idea that maybe the most powerful voices of the past decade weren't saviors, but architects of something far more calculated, something artificial, and Karoline was just getting started. She hinted there was more, far more, memos that go deeper, connections that run internationally, names that haven't been spoken yet, but would cause political earthquakes if revealed. She looked into the camera in a live stream that night and said 5 words that froze millions. You're not ready for this. And just like that, the countdown began. Not for another video, not for another leak, but for the moment when truth stops being optional and becomes unstoppable. The countdown was no longer theoretical. Karoline had lit a fuse, and now the whole system, was beginning to tremble. Her 5 chilling words echoed across every platform, shared by influencers, analysts, even anonymous whistleblower accounts. The public wasn't just curious anymore. They were bracing. Within 48 hours of her last message, the ripple turned tidal. A classified intelligence document surfaced online, time-stamped, redacted, and marked confidential, eyes only. No one knew who leaked it, but it confirmed internal awareness during Obama's second term of deliberate psychological influence operations aimed at manipulating both media and civilian sentiment during domestic unrest. Codenamed Project Echo, a project never acknowledged, never meant to be known, and it wasn't foreign, it was domestic, targeting American minds, American fears, American votes. Suddenly, Karoline wasn't a conspiracy theorist, she was a source. And Washington panicked. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings were called. Agencies launched parallel investigations, not into the content, but into who leaked it. Because if Project Echo was real, and Karoline had access to it, she had friends in places no one expected, and she knew it. In her next public appearance, she didn't gloat. She looked tired, worn but focused. She read aloud a passage from the document, the section outlining behavioral response triggers, how fear and loyalty could be exploited to redirect blame, create scapegoats, silence critics. Then she said, "This isn't just about Obama. It's about everyone who knew and stayed silent." And that hit different, because now the spotlight turned outward. Former aides, cabinet members, intelligence directors, even media executives. Who else knew? Who helped hide it? Who played their part while smiling for the cameras? The public demanded answers. Investigative journalists were flooded with tips. Suddenly, figures once thought untouchable were now issuing vague denials, backpedaling past statements, lawyering up. And then, just when people thought it couldn't escalate further, Karoline dropped her final warning. One name, one file, 1 hour. You'll understand everything. That post alone received over 50 million views in 3 hours. Speculation exploded. Was it a sitting senator? A media mogul? A global figure? People stayed glued to their screens, waiting for the moment. At exactly 7 p.m., the post went live. It wasn't just a name. It was an entire dossier. Dozens of pages, internal correspondence. Email threads, directives, charts, signatures, the name, Michelle Obama. The file alleged that she had been fully briefed on the psychological influence campaigns. Not just briefed, but involved in messaging coordination, particularly during key election cycles and national movements. The documents painted a picture not of a passive first lady, but of an active participant in narrative control, working alongside think tanks and private consultants with deep ties to intelligence circles. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. For some, it was heresy. For others, confirmation. But no one could look away. Michelle's team instantly denounced the documents as complete fabrications, but cyber analysts jumped in within hours. Some confirmed the email headers were real, IP logs matched official, networks and metadata aligned with White House systems of that era. And the public? They didn't know who to trust anymore. Protests broke out in major cities, some demanding accountability, others protecting the Obama's legacy. Families argued at dinner tables, friendships split online, and through it all, Karoline disappeared. No new posts, no streams, silence. She dropped the final piece and walked away, because her job was never to convince, it was to reveal. And now that the world had seen the whole picture, they had to decide. Keep pretending, or start asking the questions no one dared to ask before. The illusion was shattered, and truth, uncomfortable, undeniable, and irreversible, had just stepped into the light. Karoline's silence became deafening. The woman who had sparked a national crisis had vanished without a trace. No live streams, no encrypted posts, no sudden leaks. Nothing. It was as if she had stepped off the edge of the world, and that scared people more than everything she had revealed combined. Because if someone like her, with that much evidence, that much access, could simply disappear, then nothing was safe. And no one was untouchable. Authorities claimed they had no open investigation into her. But journalists whispered something else. That she was being hunted, not by law enforcement, but by black budget contractors, intelligence insiders. The kind of people who don't need warrants, the kind of people who don't leave fingerprints, and then, without warning, a video appeared. Just 28 seconds. No introduction, no background music, just Karoline in a dimly lit room. Her voice was calm, steady, even colder than before. If you're seeing this, it means I was right. It also means I may not be alive anymore. The internet exploded. The video was reposted millions of times before social media platforms began taking it down. People uploaded it again. And the more it was removed, the more people demanded to see it. She continued, "They won't admit what they did. They'll deny, smear, distract. But by now you've seen it. You've read it. This isn't just about Barack or Michelle. This is about how power works when no one is watching." And then, static. The video cut off mid-sentence. Was it intentional or intercepted? Theories multiplied. Some said she had gone underground. Others believed she had been silenced permanently. A few believed the government, or worse, global actors, were now involved, trying to stop the viral contagion of truth from spreading across borders. Because it wasn't just America watching anymore. Governments around the world began issuing monitoring advisories on the growing unrest in the U.S. stock markets fluctuated. Intelligence agencies in Europe and Asia were caught quietly launching parallel investigations. The leaked documents contained international connections, communications between Obama-era officials and foreign consultants embedded in media and behavioral research firms. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a network, global, coordinated, designed to shape not just how people voted, but how they thought. And Karoline had pulled the curtain back. The White House, under a new administration, issued a carefully worded statement saying they were reviewing past policy communications for ethical transparency. It was the closest thing to an admission anyone had heard, and it wasn't enough. Protests became nightly, some peaceful, some not. In Washington, fences went back up. Federal buildings were fortified. National Guard troops were quietly deployed in anticipation of civil unrest. The people had seen behind the mask, and they couldn't unsee it. Meanwhile, the media tried to shift the narrative, focus on rebuilding trust, on moving forward. But the ratings told a different story. Nobody wanted healing yet. They wanted answers. And somewhere out there, maybe still alive, maybe not, Karoline held the rest. More documents, more names, more footage. Something she once called the core. A final file. A kill switch. Something so potent it could destroy not just political careers but faith in the institutions themselves. The last sentence of her video haunted everyone. You haven't felt the shockwave yet. But you will. All of you will. Now the world waits. Paralyzed. Divided. And watching. Because if Karoline resurfaces, everything changes again. And if she doesn't, the silence will speak louder than any revelation she ever made. 10 days. That's how long the world waited in silence. No new footage, no hidden message. Just rumors, threats, and digital hysteria. Every conspiracy theorist felt vindicated. Every government official looked over their shoulder. And every citizen, whether they believed Karoline or not, had one thing in common. They were waiting for the core. And then at 2:17 a.m. Eastern Time, it dropped. Not through social media. Not on some underground encrypted forum. Not via whistleblower networks. It arrived in inboxes, millions of them, anonymous, untraceable. The subject line was just 3 words. This is it. Attached was a file named thecore.zip. Inside, over 6,000 documents. encrypted emails, surveillance contracts, internal media memorandums, meeting transcripts, payment ledgers, coded communication maps. The data wasn't just damning, it was staggering. It outlined a multinational influence operation spanning 2 decades, funded by public money, laundered through think tanks, and enforced by private entities with zero public accountability. Behavioral, engineering, strategic dissent mapping, psychological pressure testing, narrative warfare, the kind of documents you only see in dystopian fiction. Except this time, there were signatures, names, dates, agencies, platforms. Obama wasn't the architect. He was the face, the real architects. A coalition buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. Former intelligence directors, NGO executives, media moguls, tech pioneers. People you never see on the news. People who never ran for office but made decisions that shaped every election, every conflict, every movement. Karoline had exposed not just the puppet, but the puppeteers. And the world cracked open. Within hours, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency closed-door session. Nations demanded answers from the U.S. NATO allies released conflicting statements. Countries with known state-run propaganda arms stayed suspiciously quiet. Domestically, the reaction was explosive. The documents confirmed behavioral monitoring. Apps had been tested on schoolchildren without parental knowledge. That minority voting blocks had been algorithmically profiled and targeted with discouragement messaging. That activist movements had been infiltrated and redirected, not by enemies of the state, but by the state itself. What Karoline hinted at wasn't just real. It was worse than anyone imagined. Then came the first arrest. Not a politician, not a federal agent, not a journalist, one who had helped decode the core live on stream, charged with possession of classified material and threats to national security. The optics were immediate and horrific. The people erupted. Mass walkouts, emergency podcast leaks upon leaks. Anonymous insiders now realized it's all coming down anyway. And just when it seemed like the collapse had begun, another video appeared. This time, not from Karoline, but a hidden camera, time-stamped, geotagged, and broadcasted on a pirate. Stream Karoline alive, captive, chained, silent, her face bruised, surrounded by masked figures, a steel room, no windows. The stream lasted 12 seconds, enough to confirm she was alive, and not alone. Behind her, a wall. On it, written in black marker. The core was part 1. She has part 2. The internet froze. If the core was just the beginning, then part 2 wasn't just a revelation, it was a weapon. And suddenly the story wasn't about truth anymore. It was about survival. For 72 hours, the world held its breath. Karoline was alive, but imprisoned, silenced. Somewhere underground, in a steel room that didn't officially exist. And she had one more file. Part 2. Governments scrambled. Private contractors raced to trace the pirate stream's origin. Every intelligence agency had boots on the ground or satellites in the sky. But none of them could stop what was already in motion, because Karoline had planned for this. Redundancy, contingency, detonation. Exactly 72 hours after the stream, a countdown appeared on a decentralized blockchain-based network known only to a fringe group of truth archivists. No one had heard of it before. But the code was clear. The final file would go public in 6 hours. Unstoppable. Panic erupted inside every institution Karoline had exposed, because part 2 wasn't just a follow-up. It was the insurance policy, and they all knew it. Inside the vault of her captors, Karoline sat still, bloody but defiant. Cameras monitored her from every angle. They tried to force passwords, retinal scans, voice prompts. Nothing worked. The final file wasn't stored in her possession. It was locked in the blockchain, waiting for the clock to hit 0. And when it did, the world changed. Part 2 dropped simultaneously in over 40 countries. Every device connected to the hidden network downloaded it automatically, News stations couldn't ignore it. Even those complicit in the cover-up were forced to acknowledge what had happened. The file was called Operation Consent. It revealed the final truth, that for nearly 25 years a coalition of shadow players, governments, corporations, behavioral scientists, and psychological warfare operatives had developed a multi-tiered system to control not people's votes, but their choices. Through tailored media, social friction, predictive behavior modeling, and yes, false opposition. They didn't need to censor, they just had to guide. What to fear, who to hate, what to believe, which rebels to support. Even Karoline herself, it was revealed, had once been a monitored asset, before she cut the wire and went rogue. The final twist? Karoline had known all along she might not make it out alive, so she made sure her story, all of it, would end with every person on Earth seeing the truth for themselves. And when the file dropped, people did see. Some collapsed, some rebelled, some screamed, but no one could pretend anymore. Governments fell, news empires dissolved, laws were rewritten overnight. A wave of global civil disobedience swept across continents. Courts were flooded with charges against former leaders. Entire tech platforms were dismantled. The illusion cracked, and what lay underneath was raw, ugly, and undeniable. But it wasn't chaos. It was rebirth. No single leader emerged to take control. No party claimed victory. Instead, people turned local, accountable, transparent. Movements once dismissed as idealistic now became the foundation for a new kind of governance, one that feared centralization and respected memory. And Karoline? She never reappeared. The steel cell was found abandoned, monitors still flickering. Some say she was killed. Others say she walked away and disappeared into the silence, content with what she'd done. But carved into the wall of that empty room was one final message, scratched in steel. Don't follow me. Follow the truth. And that became the slogan etched across the new world. Not a revolution of blood, but of eyes opened. Not led by guns, but by a girl who refused to stay quiet. And when the history books are written, if anyone ever dares to write them again, they'll say this: she didn't bring down a president. She brought down the system that made him possible, and we, finally, chose something else. Truth.